My name is Ren. I am 45 years old today, but the events I'm about to tell you happened back in 2007, when I was in my 30s. Back then, I was lost in the crowds of Tokyo, penniless and alone. I was staying with my uncle, Takashi, but I could tell from his every glance that I wasn't welcome. One day, Takashi called, "Ren, I found you a job. It's not easy, but the pay is steady. You will be an assistant at an okaribi, funeral preparation house." I hesitated, but I had no other choice. The next day, we went to a funeral house attached to a small temple right next to the misty, centuries-old cemeteries of Kyoto. The place was massive, filled with moss-covered stone lanterns. I was greeted by Master Kenzo, a wise man in his 60s with a face full of deep wrinkles. "Welcome, Ren," Kenzo said. "This job is not just about washing a body. It is about respecting the soul's final journey. You must always remain clean and dignified." The first week I only watched. During the second week, I began to help. As Master Kenzo dressed the body in the white burial kimono, Kyokotabura, he whispered, "Look, Ren, this is just a shell. The soul has already departed. We are merely cleansing the memory left behind." But that night, when I was left alone in that silent room for the first time, I would realize that the story wasn't actually that simple. You are only performing the final service for this body. Ren, there is nothing to fear. Gradually, I got used to Master Kenzo's words. After a month, dealing with the dead felt normal. That small room in the funeral house was my sanctuary, but the cemetery at night turned into a different world. Sometimes I heard a woman's sobs, sometimes children's laughter mingling with the howling wind. Master Kenzo called it the play of the wind, but I wasn't so sure. And then there were the dogs, stray dogs wandering around the temple. But one of them was different, a massive jet black dog. One night, as I was closing the door, it appeared right in front of me. Its eyes glowed in the dark, with an intelligence that seemed almost human. I leaned down to find a stone to throw, but it just watched me, then silently vanished into the darkness. I couldn't sleep that night because of that human-like look in the dog's eyes. In my 6th month, Master Kenzo came to me. "Ren, we have a problem," he said. "Old man Sato, who works as the Gravedigger, is retiring and moving back to his village. We need a young man to take his place and learn the trade. Do you know anyone?" "No, master, but I'll look around," I replied. That evening, while walking among the mossy stone, lanterns at the back of the cemetery thinking about this, I heard shouting. I ran toward the noise and saw 3 young men yelling at an elderly man. "Get out of here! Begging around the temple is forbidden, you disrespectful man," they shouted. I stepped in. "Stop. What's going on?" One of the youths said angrily, "Sir, this man begged for money at our grandfather's grave," then went on to bother others too. I looked at the old man. He was about 65 years old, disheveled, thin, and exhausted. He held an old cloth bag. His clothes were tattered and covered in dust. I told the youths, "It's okay. I'll handle this. You can go." Once they left, I was alone with the old man. "So what is your name?" I asked. "Hiroshi," he said in a low voice. "Hiroshi-san, what are you doing here? Where do you live?" He bowed his head. "Nowhere. I live on the streets, but people chase me away everywhere." My heart ached. "Don't you have a family?" "No," he said. "My wife died 4 years ago. We had no children, and my relatives abandoned me." He was 61, but he looked much older. I offered him a job, replacing old man Sato as the gravedigger. His eyes filled with tears. "Are you helping me without even knowing me?" he asked. I introduced him to Sato. Sato scrutinized Hiroshi and asked, "This job is hard, Hiroshi. Sometimes the ground turns hard as stone, and the winter cold pierces your bones. Can you endure it?" Hiroshi was determined. "I will try." So, Hiroshi settled into the old guard hut next to the funeral house. For the first 3 days, everything was fine. Hiroshi worked hard and never complained. However, on the morning of the 4th day, I was horrified when I saw him. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his face was as white as chalk. "Are you okay, Hiroshi-san?" I asked. His voice was trembling. "Ren, strange things are happening in this cemetery." He checked his surroundings and whispered, "Someone is wandering around the hut at night. I hear footsteps. I look outside and no one is there, but the sounds don't stop. This isn't the wind, Ren. It's something else. Someone is there, Ren. I can feel it." That day, Hiroshi was very distracted. On the 5th night, I was out for some business. When I returned in the morning, there was a knock on my door. It was Hiroshi. His face was pale as chalk. "Ren, I saw something tonight," he said, trembling. A face looked through the window. It wasn't a human face. It was very long, and the eyes were massive. It was just staring at me. "Maybe you were tired and imagined it." "Hiroshi-san," I said, but he shouted, "No!" There were 3 knocks on the door and I heard a voice. Hiroshi. Hiroshi, open the door! It knew my name. Then the door opened by itself. There was a body wrapped in a white burial shroud on the threshold. Beside it was a note, "Purify this." My blood ran cold. Hiroshi continued. I carried the body to the washing room. It was as light as a child, but as I began to wash it, a living man walked in. He looked exactly like the corpse. At that moment, the dead one suddenly stood up. Both of them looked at me and smiled. Then they walked to the door together. One was dressed, the other naked. When they reached the door, the naked one collapsed again, dead once more. Just then, a group of people in black kimonos with faces the color of earth entered. "Help us, let's bury him," they said. They shouldered the dead man. In a daze, I took my shovel and went with them to the deepest part of the cemetery. And we buried him. "Where did you bury him?" I asked in horror. "I'll show you," he said. And I forced Hiroshi to his feet. He led me to a secluded corner of the cemetery, among centuries-old mossy stones. "Here it is," he said. Indeed, there was a freshly dug grave with no inscription, no date, and no mark. My knees were trembling. "Hiroshi-san, did you really bury someone?" I whispered. "They weren't human, Ren. They were all dead." He began to cry. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right in front of me. "We are going to dig," I said. I brought a shovel and started digging. After a while, a piece of white cloth, a burial kimono, kyokatabira, appeared. Beneath it lay a corpse. It looked very fresh, but the shroud was wrapped hastily and irregularly. In horror, I quickly refilled the grave and we fled the scene. That evening, I told Hiroshi, "Stay in my room tonight." In the middle of the night, we both held our breath when I heard that strange rustling from under the window, as if something was crawling on the ground. The next morning, I got an emergency call from my uncle Takashi. My grandmother had been rushed to the hospital. I explained the situation to Master Kenzo. I had to leave. Hiroshi panicked. "Ren, I beg you, don't go! I don't want to be alone at night." I told him not to worry and to go to Master Kenzo if anything happened. But my grandmother's surgery took longer than expected, and I couldn't make it back that night. I couldn't return until the afternoon of the 3rd day. When I entered the temple grounds, there was a heavy, suffocating silence. Master Kenzo greeted me, but his face was grim. "Ren, go check on Hiroshi. He's in a very strange state. I found him yesterday morning, huddled in the corner of his hut, trembling with fear. I didn't push him too much, but you should go see." I ran to the hut. It was ice cold inside. Hiroshi was hunched in a corner, leaning his back against the wall. "Hiroshi-san," no answer. When I went to him and touched his shoulder, he slowly raised his head. I froze at the sight. His face had turned the color of ash, and his eyes were wide and vacant. In just 2 days, he looked as if he had lost 10 kilos. He was wasting away. "Ren," he whispered. His voice sounded like the rustle of dry leaves in a graveyard. They came. The dead came. I gave him some water and dampened his face. Holding the glass with trembling hands, he began to tell. "It was the 2nd night after you left. I woke up at midnight to a sound. There were dozens of footsteps outside. But it wasn't a normal walk. They were dragging their feet across the ground. I approached the window and then..." Hiroshi burst into sobs. There were about 15 figures outside. All were dressed in stark white burial kimonos, kyokatabira. They were swaying, walking slowly. Their faces, Ren, their faces were entirely covered in earth. Their hair was wet and matted, as if they had just crawled out of muddy water. Their hands were nothing but bone. They moved toward the heart of the cemetery and stopped before a grave. Then, all at once, as if they were a single body, they slowly turned toward me. They looked directly at me with those earth-covered faces. They all turned toward me at once. Hiroshi-san looked as if he might scream again while recounting that moment. I tried to calm him down. "It's okay, it's over." "What happened next?" I asked. "One of them started walking toward me," he said. "As it got closer, I saw its face. It had no eyes, Ren, just 2 pitch-black hollow sockets, and its mouth was open incredibly wide, as if it were letting out an eternal silent scream." Hiroshi continued, trembling. "It leaned against the door of the hut. Then it struck the window pane. The glass cracked. I heard that terrifying voice. 'Hiroshi, you are with us now. You are with us.' I don't remember anything after that. I fainted. When I woke up in the morning, I was lying in the middle of the cemetery, next to an unmarked grave. I had no idea how I got there. After that day, Hiroshi-san was never the same. He would stare into space for hours, smiling to himself while scratching strange symbols into the dirt. One day when I approached him, I saw him writing names in the soil with his finger. His voice had changed. It was deeper, as if coming from a tomb. "I am writing the names of the dead," he said. "That is what they wanted." I told Master Kenzo, and he realized the gravity of the situation. But the following night around 2 a.m., the sounds I heard ended everything. There were multiple voices coming from Hiroshi's hut. I pressed my ear to the door. Hiroshi was saying, "Yes, I understand." A deep, echoing voice replied, "You are with us now, Hiroshi. Do not fear." Another voice cut in, "Be silent and accept it." I couldn't take it anymore. I threw the door open and burst inside. When I burst into the hut, Hiroshi-san was alone, but the window was wide open. An ice-cold wind was pouring in. "Who were you talking to?" I shouted. With that eerie smile on his face, he said, "With them. My friends are talking to me now, Ren. We've become friends." My blood ran cold. Hiroshi was either losing his mind or something dark was taking possession of him. The next day at mid-afternoon, 2 young men came running to the temple. "Help! We heard someone's voice near the old cemetery," they cried. I ran with them to the section where the moss-covered, centuries-old stone tombs lay. Some had collapsed from neglect. From the half-open lid of a stone grave, a faint moan emerged. "Get me out, please." I shone my flashlight into the hole and was horrified. Someone was trapped between the earth and the stones, unable to move. We quickly pulled the rocks aside and dragged the man out. It was Hiroshi. "Who locked you in here? What happened?" I asked, but he fainted before he could answer. We carried him to the funeral house. For days, he didn't eat a single bite, just stared at the empty ceiling. It was as if his soul had left this world. In the middle of the night, he began to mutter, "They took me. They took me among the dead." I stayed there. No matter how much I asked who did it, he sank back into that deep silence. And that night, I experienced the final horror that I will never forget. I opened my eyes with a feeling that someone was watching me. Hiroshi-san was sitting on his bed, but he wasn't alone. There was a woman standing before him, but she wasn't a normal woman. Her image flickered as if 2 layers of reality were overlapping, now clear, now blurred. Her hair was so long it flowed down to the floor like a black tide. When she spoke, her voice echoed as if coming from the bottom of a deep well. "Hiroshi, you belong to me." The woman turned toward me slowly. As she approached, the horror of her face became clear, or rather, the lack of one. There was only a deep, void-like darkness and 2 glowing blood-red eyes. She came right up to me. Her breath felt like ice against my skin. Then she opened her mouth. It grew wider and wider like an abyss, and from within it came the screams and moans of 1,000 souls. In terror, I began to recite prayers. The woman let out an ear-splitting metallic shriek and vanished into thin air. When I opened my eyes, the room was empty, and Hiroshi-san was sleeping as if nothing had happened. The next evening, my friends Kenji and Daisuke came to visit. "Let's talk for a bit," they said. Just as we were sipping our tea, a sound rang out. A stone had hit the window, cracking the glass. We looked outside. No one was there, but chilling laughter echoed from the darkness of the cemetery. "Who's there?" Kenji shouted. At that moment, 4 more stones flew through the air and struck the hut. It was raining stones, yet there was no one in sight to throw them. Reciting prayers, we all rushed inside and bolted the door behind us. But the sounds from outside wouldn't stop. They were pounding on the door, clawing at the walls and screaming, "Get out! This place belongs to us." We waited in terror, huddled together until dawn. With the first light of morning, I made my decision. I can't stay here anymore. I'm leaving. I told Master Kenzo I was quitting and packed my belongings. Before departing, I wanted to say goodbye to Hiroshi-san, but he was nowhere to be found. We searched every corner, called out behind every grave, but it was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed him whole. I left the cemetery and found a job at a vegetable market in another district of Tokyo. Slowly, my life was returning to normal. Exactly 7 months had passed. One day, returning home exhausted from work, I noticed a figure standing at my door. As I drew closer, I froze. It was Hiroshi. But this was not the Hiroshi-san I knew. His eyes glowed with a raw light in the darkness, and he wore that frozen, terrifying smile. He looked at me and whispered, "Ren." I finished writing the names. "Now it's your turn." "Ren," he said. His voice no longer belonged to a human. It was like an echo coming from deep within. "Thank you for taking me to that cemetery. I am with them now, and I am finally happy." He slowly turned around and disappeared around the street corner. I ran after him, but when I reached the corner, the street was empty. He had vanished like dust in the wind. I went to an old Buddhist temple and told everything to a wise monk. After a long silence, the monk said, "That man was under a heavy spiritual possession. Ren, Perhaps this dark bond was formed long before he even met you. What you saw at your door was not the man himself. It was a yokai or a restless spirit appearing in his form. I asked in fear, "What should I do?" "It is following me." The monk gave me a protective amulet, omamori, and said, "Keep your heart pure, never cease your prayers, and always purify your soul." They tried to seize you, but your light did not allow it. Now they are only trying to frighten you to open that door once more. Since that day, I have completely changed my life. I never missed my temple visits. I recited prayers constantly, and I purified my home with incense. I never saw Hiroshi-san or that terrifying entity again. The sounds stopped, the shadows retreated, but of one thing I am certain. The real Hiroshi is still there, deep in the cemetery, among them. May you always be protected from the unseen evils.